Hi everyone. Since earlier this year, when I was initiated into a form of energy healing called AVT, Advanced Vibrational Techniques, it really heightened and intensified my intuition and psychic abilities. And so when I offer these energy healing sessions with clients, I always combine them with a channeling. I connect with the higher guidance of my client, so this could be their higher self and or their spirit guide. And through that communication, I receive very specific guidance for the client that I then transmit to them. And inevitably, this feels familiar and resonant to them because it is coming from a part of themselves. And these sessions have been so invaluable to me as well, because I am essentially witnessing some beautiful pearls of wisdom that I just would not have access to in my normal work with people. So today I wanted to share a recent example of a session I did with a client called Lucy, not her real name, who has had a lifelong eating disorder. And this eating disorder presents in the form of binging and purging unhealthy foods that feeds into a general cycle of low self-esteem, guilt and shame, and a very, very challenging relationship that she has with food and with, feeding herself. So after I did the energy healing part of the session, I connected with my client's higher self. And by the way, all of this is done distant, remotely, while the client's sleeping. So there's no engagement, no conversation happening with the client. So I connected with the client's higher self. And immediately, what was shown to me was an image of my client as a baby. And the clear message I got was that there was nothing abusive or overtly harmful that took place, but there was something that happened during the moments where my client was being breastfed by her mother that confused or disrupted her own feelings of hunger and satiety. So I wasn't shown exactly and precisely what this was, but I felt and I was kind of given the vibration of this, which was that it wasn't overtly toxic or abusive, but on a very subtle level, this really disrupted my client's ability to understand her own feelings of hunger and satiety. So the guidance that was given from my client's higher self, and this is what I love about these sessions, is that the guidance is often so practical and things that my clients can implement into their day-to-day. The guidance that was given was so simple, yet very precise and on point. And it was that now, whenever she feeds herself anything, she has to do it as though she is a caring, patient, nurturing mother feeding her baby. So you have to understand that until this point, like I said, my client's relationship to food was very, very complicated and uneasy. So it was often coupled with such deep feelings of guilt and disgust that, it made eating very, very challenging for her. So the guidance that was given was that she needs to visualize herself as a mother archetype, feeding herself as the child archetype. So what this means is she needs to tune in and actually be attuned to the baby's needs so precisely. So if the baby is hungry, she feeds the baby with patience, with care, with love. But as soon as the baby is not hungry, she doesn't force it, she stops and she takes a step back. And if the baby is not ready for food, if the baby is not hungry, no matter if it's dinner time, no matter if it's been over 6 hours since her last meal, it doesn't matter. She takes a step back and she does not force feed the baby. That was the guidance that was given from her higher self. So, after I finished this session, I sent my client the recording. I gave her the guidance that I saw and heard. And what was interesting was that she said that she spoke to her mother directly after the session. And interestingly enough, her mother had said, "Oh, it's so interesting that you've just called me because I've had such beautiful feelings and memories of you this whole morning. And I felt really deeply connected to you today." And actually, prior to the channeling, the energy work that I did for that client was a lot of healing the link between her and her mother. That was what I was called to do. So I had done a lot of really beautiful, nourishing, nurturing, energetic healing work between her and her mother anyway. And so it was a beautiful sort of confirmation of this when my client's mother had sort of felt this closeness to her that morning. And so as my client was on the phone with her mother, she asked her these questions. What was breastfeeding me like? And her mother said, "I loved breastfeeding you. It was so beautiful. I felt so close to you. I loved breastfeeding. I loved the bonding. And it used to calm me down so much. So I would often breastfeed you because it would calm me down so much." And her mother, my client, has, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 other siblings. So the context for this is that when my client was a baby and being breastfed, there was quite a lot of chaos and noise in the house. And so my client's mother said on the phone, it was often so loud and messy and chaotic in the house, and sometimes I would just go and breastfeed you because it would calm me down so much. It was like I was in this bubble with you, and it got me away from all the chaos around the house. And that was the peace. That was the peace that I had sensed. It was that amidst this chaotic environment, I'm not saying this was the only time, but often the mother would breastfeed the child when she needed the soothing and when she needed the calming, not when the baby needed the food, the milk. So what was happening on a very subtle level was that this was confusing my client's own understanding of if she's hungry, if she even needs food, if she even wants food. Because no baby is really going to reject the breast because of how comforting and nurturing that bonding experience is. But if the baby is not desiring food, sustenance, milk, and yet being offered the breast, then what happens? And so this was the impact that this left on my client. And this isn't to say that in all situations where, there's stress around the house or there's chaos and, babies are being breastfed, that is always going to leave this kind of harmful impact. This is very specific for my client, also because she's very sensitive. And, we all have our own lessons to learn. We all have our lessons to learn in the very specific kind of path that we lead through life. But I just found this very interesting because it gives us a very a different sort of outlook and insight into the nature of how such a very subtle thing, subtle but important, let's face it. I mean, you know, under the age of 2, what are the most important events that happen in life? I mean, one of them is definitely being breastfed, right? So, yes, whilst it's subtle, it as you can see, it does leave a lasting impact because it's a big thing. So anyway, I then gave my client the exercise to feed herself as though she were a baby, and to feed herself as though she were the mother, a mother that's very much in tune and attuned to the baby's needs. And the beautiful part about this was that 2 weeks later, I reached out to the client and she did this exercise. She practiced it. Every day she fed herself as much as she could because, of course, like everyone, her life is busy, so she wasn't always able to do this. But as much as she could, she did feed herself in this way. And as soon as she wasn't hungry, she would stop feeding herself. And she said it was life-changing for her. And it began to transform her own relationship to food. It made it bearable. It made it much less stressful. It made it calming. So it was so beautiful to hear that feedback from her. So, yeah, I wonder what you think about this. I wonder if it was interesting for you, if it gave you other insights, and if you would be interested in such a session for yourself, AVT, remote energy healing, combined with channeling guidance from your higher self. Just reach out and I'll tell you more.